In this demo, I'm going to be discussing how authentication works in my application, so how registration and logins work. So firstly, here I have my index.js, which is basically where my server is created and where my routes are registered. So in order for authentication to take place, I've imported auth routes from my auth.routes.js, and here I declared my mounting API endpoint, API auth. Then I have my user model. This is basically the structure of the data that the user inputs when they register. So they usually import the first name, last name, email, password, role, bio. The date it's created at is returned. The interests, skills, location, goals, and experience. And in order to create this, I use my mongoose. I create a user schema, which is the structure of my data, and the name of my model is user. Now I have my auth routes. This is basically defining my authentication endpoints, register and login, as well as delete. So in order to declare these endpoints and create routes, I use Express, which creates a router, and router helps me make my requests to those endpoints. So firstly, over here I have a post request being made to register endpoint, and when that is made, over here this data is being validated using the validate request method. So it's just checking the format of the data that the user inputs to ensure that it's actually correct and meets the format. Validate request, which is called, is a middleware, and it's just to handle the request validation. Then register user controller is basically called straight after this register endpoint is hit. My register user controller is basically over here in controllers, which is what I'm going to discuss now. So yeah, then essentially I have my login endpoint over here. This post request is being made to the login. This is mainly for when a user logs in, and the data is checked and validated to ensure that it has the correct format. And login user controller is called. Then this is my controller that handles the process of deleting an account, and this is the route that I declared here, the endpoint essentially. Then I have my auth controller file. So it's just gonna handle the user registration and the user's login. So first I import the user model, import bcrypt in order to allow me to hash and encrypt the password that is created by the user when registering. JWT from JSON Web Token is imported to create a JWT token and give it to the logged in user to ensure that they're actually logged in. And send welcome email method is a function I created where a user receives an email as soon as they register. So this is my register user controller. Essentially here, firstly, it's just checking if the user already exists. It does that using this find one method and the user model. And if the user already exists in the database, then it's just gonna say the user already exists. You don't have to register an account for that user. But what if the user doesn't exist and the user is registering an account? I use bcrypt, which is what I imported here, to hash the user's password when they place it or when they register. and that's saved to this variable. And here I'm basically creating a new user that will be added to the database using the user model. So as you can see here, all the data that the user inputs from first name all the way to experience. Then I have the send welcome method that is over here, that is called, and email and first name is passed there, because this method, it basically ensures that a user receives an email as soon as they register an account, and then it shows this message that the user has registered successfully. If not, then it shows this error in this catch block. Then I have my login controller over here. This essentially is for logging in, and we have the find one method where it looks for the user in the database, and if the user doesn't exist, then it just shows that the user is not found. If the user does exist, it uses bcrypt.compare to compare the user's hashed or encrypted password with the user's password that he's inputting in the form when logging in. And if those passwords match, then it's good, the user can log in. But here it says if the password doesn't match, then there's invalid credentials. So when the user logs in, a JWT token is created and given to that user to ensure that they actually logged in. And as a response, it gives back the token as a response in JSON format, as well as the user's details such as the ID, first name, last name, and the role. If a user doesn't successfully log in, it shows these errors. Then this is the controller for deleting a user's account. So when a user wants to delete their account and they actually do it, this is what handles that functionality. And we use find by ID and delete to find the user in the database by the ID and delete that account. And in order to find that user in the database, we use the user model. So if the user doesn't exist in the database, it just shows user not found. If the user exists and we actually press a delete button, then the account gets deleted. If the account doesn't get deleted, it just shows these error messages. And that is basically my register and login user controller. So right now I just covered the back end when it comes to authentication. Let's have a look at my React front end. So over here I have a register component as well as the login component. So this is actually what creates the form and the interaction on the client side. So let's talk about that. Firstly here, in this return, I have the form itself, basically, for a user to actually register an account. So basically what happens is it takes the user's first name. The user has to input a last name, an email, password as well. They have to choose whether they're a learner or mentor, add the location, the interest as well, and submit. So what happens is, how the state of data works here is, firstly basically when a user inputs a name, for instance, this handle change method is triggered, and we find that here. What this does is it just changes the state of data when a user is inputting their first name, last name, or their email, or whatever. So in the handle change, we have the set form method, which is basically just gonna create a new object that has this key value pair that takes the name, referring to either the first name, last name, email, password, or whatever values the user's inputting. And when the user inputs, for instance, the last name, set form function here changes the state of data for the form variable to whatever the user inputs as their last name. And it does the same for everything, every field as well. So yeah, basically user puts the last name, the email, all the way till their interests. So when the user is done doing that and they want to register, they click the submit button. When the submit button is clicked, this on submit handler is runs, and the handle submit method is triggered. This is just going to handle the submission of the user's details on the form, as you can see here. So that's what that does. And over here, there's a new object will be sent to the backend when the user submits the form. That is done using payload. And then here is basically where the request is made as soon as the user clicks that submit button and registers. Post request is made to the auth register endpoint, and then registration is successful after that. Straight after that, set form is just going to change the state of data for all these fields and make them empty strings to reset those form fields after user registers. So that's basically how registration works in the front end. Then here in my login component, pretty much works the same, but the only difference is login basically only needs the email and the password. And when the user inputs that, the state of data changes using set form, and whatever email the user puts gets placed in the form variable, so it gets placed here, and the password gets placed here as a value. And when the user basically submits the login, handle submit runs, and it's going to handle the submission of that form. So basically what happens is here the request, the post request is immediately made to auth login endpoint. So a post request is made to the back end essentially. And as soon as the user logs in, a token is saved and it's saved into the local storage. So that token is given to the user and is saved into the local storage to ensure that they're logged in. Then here we're just going to trigger storage event, so navbar updates immediately, and then it just navigates to the dashboard page after logging in. So that's basically how authentication works in the front end as well as in the back end. So to show it working basically on my application, firstly I'm gonna register an account. So as you can see, as I was saying, it takes the first name, last name, all the way to interest. So I can place the first name, my last name, the email, password, and here I can choose whether I want to be a learner or a mentor on the application. So here I choose to be a mentor. Then I can place my location and all my interests, so coding, business, and sports, and then I can register the account. So while that's registering, as you can see it says registering. So basically in my register component, you can see here I use have this condition. That's what allows that. So it's basically saying if loading is true, so meaning if it's still loading after you register, it must show this string, registering. If it's not true, then it'll just give you the option to click the register button. So this is basically what it's showing currently. And now that I'm registered into the account, I can log in. So I have my login detail. I placed my email, and I placed my password, and then I can log in. And then I'm taken to my dashboard page over here. And yeah, the authentication works perfectly, and the user can register and log in. So that's basically my demo for authentication, user logging in and registering in the Bula Next account.